everyone, it's Mambo and welcome back to episode 2 of my Java game tutorial, and today we're going to be continuing off from where we left off. So let's just load in the project. And we're going to be working on the graphics handler class, which is what I have right now. The first thing we want to do, actually before we do that, let's just, right now we just have a window that pops up and it's great. It doesn't do much, but anyway, that's about it. Actually, there's a few things I mentioned that, like this X on close, which I didn't actually talk about. All it does is just when I X the window, it actually stops the program. If I commented out this line, what it would do is, I don't know if you noticed, but at the bottom of the screen right here, it says program app finished with exit code 0. When you X this, it doesn't do that. So what I have to do is actually have to manually terminate the program. So we want to keep that in. If there's a window in the program that maybe you have and you don't want it to close the program whenever you close it, then you'd want to either set this to that, or let's just make this a star so we can do anything. Could do like do nothing on close or dispose on close. There's a lot of options. So yeah, that's something that I forgot about, but we don't need that class anymore. I actually don't think we. No, we do actually need that class. There's a few. No, we don't. Sorry. What am I? Okay. We don't need the main class either, actually. So in here, we're to actually have this class implement what's called Actionlistener. And what the Actionlistener needs is it needs this method, a overridden method. Now, actually, yeah, action. No, it's not overridden though. It's actually implemented. Sorry, implement action performed. Now, if you don't know what overriding is basically this is a interface and it has method or multiple methods in it that need to be overridden, which basically whatever was in it before needs to be like put in with new code. In this case, it didn't have anything in it. It's just a way for you to have certain methods. The canvas is extending, that's inheriting this class, and that just gives you a bunch of other useful stuff. So that's the first thing we need to do. The other thing I want to do is override from the canvas, and it's called paint, and that's just going to basically paint our graphics onto the screen. The other two things I want is a couple methods. I'll make them private so that they aren't accessible to other classes. I'll make them voids because they don't need to return anything when you call it, and they're going to be update, and I'll leave empty parentheses because I don't need any arguments for that, and we'll copy this and we'll paste it and we'll call this one render. And we'll give it a graphics G. So it needs to be passed a graphics. It doesn't necessarily need to be called G, but it can use this G object, which is graphics, in here. Now, updates basically get called every frame of the game, so every about 30 times a second, and it's going to basically update all the code. And the rendering's going to update all the graphics, and the code's always going to get updated first. So that's how that works. I haven't actually done anything, so technically they don't do anything right now. You can see, if you hover over it, it says private method update is never used. So, first thing we're going to do is in action performed, we're going to call repaint. And repaint is a built-in, no, not render, repaint. And repaint is a built-in method that's basically going to repaint or call this paint method every time this is called. It's going to call paint, and in paint we're going to call update, and then we're going to call render. No, not repaint, render. And render needs graphics G, which handily it already has in here, so I don't have to initiate or make it. It's already handled with. And the repaint I actually don't have to call the G because it's not a direct calling. This is probably some method in the component Java component class, so yeah, that's a thing. But this really isn't doing much, so what we need to do is we actually need to create a private, and we'll make it static. Actually, no, we don't. Yes, we do. We can make it static if we want to. It doesn't really matter. Private static, and we're going to make it a timer. And this is specifically a JavaX swing timer, not a Java util timer. It has to be a JavaX swing. So make sure when you're importing it, it's a Java swing and not a Java, just a Java.timer. It's going to come up with some errors. We're going to call this T, and we're going to set it equal to a new timer. And in here, we're just going to the milliseconds. Every millisecond, we want this game to redo itself, and 1,000 milliseconds. So if we do 100, it's going to be like code and stuff is going to redone every 100 milliseconds. So basically 10 times a second. If we do that, it's 100 times a second. So if we do this, it's going to be 50 times a second. And if we do, well, that's 50 times a second. Let's do 25. That's probably going to be a little bit less than 50 times a second. We also need to add in, we're going to pass through the handler, or the listener, which is basically going to be this. The reason why it's this, actually here, the reason why it's this is because we're referring to, whatever. Let's get rid of the static. Not static, sorry. Referring to, when I refer to this, I'm referring to the action lister, which is referring to the action performed. But basically what this timer does is it's going to go and call the action performed method every 25 milliseconds. So all I have to do is the constructor is called t.start, and this is going to start the timer, and looks like we can actually create a local variable if we wanted to. So just put it right in there if you wanted to. So basically, whenever the graphics handler is added to the frame, it's going to call this t.start, and that's basically going to call this, and it's going to call this, and it's going to call this and this. So a bit confusing. The reason why you need to do it like this, well, you don't need to, but the reason why it makes it easy is because this graphics G is being handled for you. You don't have to initiate it, you don't have to create a new graphics G. It's already there and you can start using it. So that's one reason why it's useful. So if we run it now, it's not gonna really do anything else. It's gonna look the exact same, but one thing we can do is whenever we call the update, I'm just going to do a system.out print line, which is just gonna print to the console, and it's gonna say updated. It's going to be updated just to let us know that's updated, and this should happen really frequently. As you can see, it's just spamming away on the console here. It's because that's being happened every 25 milliseconds, so that's actually pretty fast. That's good. We don't want it slow because we want to make sure that the graphics aren't chunky, but we don't need to see that, because that's just going to bog down the game by having to actually print something to the console. So we're just gonna leave it like without that, and we'll add stuff into that later. But that's basically what we need to do. Actually, there's some more things we need to do, because right now we could draw some things. Like we could draw a G dot, and we're gonna just do fill rect, which is basically gonna fill the rectangle. And it's gonna fill a rectangle. So draw a rectangle with the center filled in with the color. And in this case, we're just going to draw it 0 and 0, 0 pixels X and 0 pixels Y. And the width is going to be jframe dot get width, except that it's not working. So what we actually have to do is go back to our frame class. And I knew we had to do this. I just thought that we could just do that. But what we actually have to do is we have to go make two public static float, we'll call this float, and we're going to, and so that basically what that means, it's going to return a float whenever we call it, and this is going to just be get width, and this is just going to be f dot get width, and we're going to do the same thing, except that we actually need to return that, so we're going to do return get width. So whenever we call it, it's going to return the get width of the frame. And we're going to do the same thing, but this time we're going to call it get height, height, confused. Okay, there. And then we're going to do the same thing, but f.get height, like that. And the reason why we need these is because that needs to be called from an initiated JFrame variable. We go back here, and now we can do frame dot get width and frame dot get height. And now these need to be cast as integers because we had to return a float, and really you don't need to do that, but I just want to do it so that to keep everything consistent. So that's gonna fill a rectangle, and it's gonna fill across the whole screen. That's why we had to get those, and the reason why I want to do that and not just have a variable that's equal to the width and height is because if we change the size of the screen, we want to be able to change the width and height as well. So it's going to be updated as the screen's being thing. Now the other thing we want to do is do g.setColor, and it's just going to set the color, and we'll just do black for now. Color.black, I mean color.black. And you can use either one. I think the better version, like the the black or the black, I like to use this one. It doesn't really matter, I don't think. If it does error, use this one. So that's basically just going to fill the screen with a black. But you can see it's doing this weird flashing thing, which is not good. And that's because we're not using what's called buffering. So we're going to close that, and actually, for now, we're just going to comment that out. I'm going to comment these two lines of code out. Because, actually, we'll just get rid of them for now. Because we need to do buffering. Now, we're going to use triple buffering, I think that's called. Now, basically what we have to do here is just create a new, what's called buffer strategy. And we'll call it BS. We'll set it equal to new, actually no, just get buffer strategy. And actually this is technically a this.get buffer strategy. And this is referring to canvas. So if we didn't have extend canvas, this would error. Now that's awesome, but what we need to do is we need to do an if statement to see if BS is equal to null. So if it's equal to nothing, like if it's not been set up, then we're going to call this bit of code. And it's basically just me create, that's what it is, create buffer strategy, and the num buffers is how many buffers do we want, and we'll do 3. 2 is good, but it uses less memory and doesn't perform as well, and 4 uses too much memory but performs really well, so a mix between is 3. So that's only going to be called if the BS has never been created before. Now we're just going to do G is equal to bs.getDrawGraphics. Basically what this is going to do, and looks like, oh, that's why we have to return this there. Basically what this, and we're just going to return that so that this actually has been updated. But what basically this is going to do is it's going to basically say, okay, when you draw graphics with the G, you're going to draw it under the buffers. And what a buffer is basically you're going to draw it into a buffer, and then the buffer is going to be moved to, I guess, the second buffer, and then the second buffer is going to be moved to the third buffer. The third buffer is going to be drawn on the screen. The reason why this is useful is because the screen knows what it's going to be drawn to before it just goes ahead and draws it. So it kind of just helps out with rendering anyway. So that's what you want to do there, and then the next thing we want to do is just do g.dispose and then bs.show. So it's going to dispose the previous and show. It's just that's what you want to do. And then in here is where we're going to draw. So we're just going to do g.setColor like we did before, and just do color or .black, and then we'll do g.fill rect, and we'll just do 0 0 frame.get width, frame.get height, and we'll do an integer there because That has to happen. And then we'll go over here, drop that in there, because we just did that before. We could have just copied it, but there. So now that hopefully should fix the, yeah, see, it's now not like flashing black and white. So, well, a little bit, but only when I move it. If I leave it, it's fine. All right, so that's great. We've set up our graphics handler class, and in the next video, we're gonna set up the states class and stuff. So that's basically how that works. Why we want to do that is because in our game we're gonna have different states, like the main state. So we'll call that main state, like for instance the main menu state. So where you have like the exit, the settings, and like the play. So then we'll have a settings state. So we'll bring us to the state where it shows all our settings, and then on the play state we'll like draw the game board, I guess. So the reason why we don't want that is because basically we're going to have a if statement to see what's the current state, and it will basically call this certain render thing with a certain state. I'll get into that in the next episode. Anyway, hope you guys all enjoyed this episode, and I'll see you guys all later.